Welcome back to my Blast of Master Zero Destroyer Mode guide and walkthrough. This is Area 2, otherwise known as the residential area. And this area, I'm going to be taking a bit of a different approach, but some tips to give in this area. This area has a lot of mines, which do not shoot at you like those sons of bitches worms, which they are very much like those enemies you see in games where your shots are just slightly high enough to where you have to take them out with normal means, and it's just very annoying. And even if you do manage to kill them, they will still have that martyrdom bullshit where they'll just shoot a bullet right at you, and because you have very little iframes, they can be the end of you, so make sure you combat them accordingly. And also, don't go in that purple sludge. That will also hurt you. And finally, you have these little dudes who like to pop out every now and then. Treat them with respect, because they actually take quite a bit of hits to go down, and you do not really have a lot of equipment to deal with them. You can use your triple rocket if you need to take them out through walls and stuff, but I do eventually end up getting a little sloppy, so I actually have to play very carefully, because this area is kind of long, and for this part of the guide, I'm only going to the boss right away, because my intentional strategy is to just get the second upgrade to your blaster, which will not only do the most damage, I think it's a damage upgrade, I'm pretty sure it is. It's a mainstay in Zero 2, so I guess that's cool. And plus, you can essentially get around much faster when you revisit this area, because after you go to Area 3 and beat the Central Gear, you're going to have to backtrack back to Area 1, and during this process, you're also going to be going through Area 2, but thankfully this game does backtrack pretty well, where you don't have to go through a lot of the area, and the level design is just woven so well that even though this part of the guide is going to mainly be this one road to the boss, you don't really need to go through most of this, since you can essentially use the bottom part of the stage to traverse through everywhere. But one thing I do want to mention is that I actually fired up Blast Master Zero on the Switch, and since the map is uncovered and unlimited mode, I actually checked what dungeons are necessary in Area 2, and every dungeon is required. It either has an item, one of which is the Energy Guard, which, to those that don't know, there is a power-up in this game that's introduced that's supposed to protect your weapon upgrades from being drained, since in this game, at least in normal mode, if you have that shit and you take damage, you won't lose your gun upgrade as long as the energy guard is up. You'll still lose it if the barrier is down, but it's meant to be like a crutch so that you don't lose your overpowered wave beam right away, which, unfortunately in this mode, it's not going to be as helpful, but one of the few bosses that does work on surprisingly well, even with Turbo, is of course the second phase of the final boss, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And also, just as a footnote, I am going to be mentioning in the descriptions of what weaknesses the bosses are. Like I mentioned in the first video, unless the boss is major bullshit, I'm going to try mainly to use the default gun, since most bosses are weak to it. And usually in certain situations, I don't want to assume the player is only having specific gun upgrades, since most of the time they're not even really that useful, and this area is a little harder, especially because of those little dudes, but just play it safe. You only get one checkpoint, I believe, so you have to play very carefully. I barely had any health left, so I had to play extremely carefully. So this area is a little harder, but once you get to the end, you will be thankful that you'll get that sweet-ass gun upgrade for your tank. But now we're about to enter the dungeons, and this dungeon's theme is that you have this purple sludge, which, unlike in Doom Eternal, actually does not slow you down, and there actually is a cooldown, a fairly reasonable cooldown, when you can enter the sludge again. But what's actually really interesting is that the moment it fades, you will not take damage until the active hitbox of the sludge is there. And unfortunately, there is a lot of sludge in these dungeons, so tread carefully. This boss, the main boss of Area 2, is is a little bullshit, but if you do have the Penetrator, his weakness in Destroy mode is actually Reflect, but again, because I didn't have Reflect, it's not going to do me good. His weakness in the normal mode is the Penetrator, and also, I would just recommend taking the hit, since you only lose 1 hit point, and it'll save you a little bit of time. Despite that, though, I actually had to restart this area a couple times and actually got very careless, especially in the final gauntlet to go through a lot of the sludge. But one other thing to mention about the sludge is that even though in this game you do not have many iframes when getting hit from enemies, you actually still keep the same iframes when you get hit by the sludge. So you could theoretically cheese this area by just taking all the hits in the world, but you do risk losing your gun upgrade. So if you don't really care about that, then go for it. But it's kind of a risk versus reward thing. Notice how, like, I'm taking the normal have the normal iframes compared to when you get hit by enemies. And of course, there's that little cheeky edit because I died in this boss a couple times because he can be real bullshit. This boss, I would actually recommend using the weakness for this boss because it will make this fight a little easier. But if you don't have access to that, you can of course just use the grenades, which I believe it takes 6 to destroy them, which you only have enough to take out the arms once. But basically, with this boss fight, assuming using the regular gun, pierce his green projectiles, which can be shot, but not the brighter color ones, which do not work. Just keep firing, and if you get enough drops from the explosive like I did, which I got extremely lucky because the shots can actually drop up ammo and stuff. So if that happens, you are going to be insanely lucky, and you'll do this fight no problem. But if you're in a situation where the arms are active, then you are going to be in for a fight. Because also, just to mention, when the boss's shout lights up and he starts splooging everywhere, you obviously don't want to step in that. He will do this regardless if his arms are up or not, so just mind the gap. This son of a bitch just loves to do that move where most bosses do, where they cover one side of the screen and they just twist and turn, and you have to play this like really weird game. Also, make sure you predict the movement of the strafe. Like, don't just go where he's gonna go, but kind of like strafe in the way where he's gonna be turning so you have more time to fight him. And also when he does this move, it will severely limit you, but I got extremely lucky, so this boss can be a little tricky, but as long as you got that quick trigger finger and you get lucky with the sub-weapon drops, you can kill this boss even with the starting gun. So there's Eve, the best lady in the game. The only other character in this game really besides Fred, but we'll be wrestling him a little later. But like I said, this guide isn't really about showing the story, and since it's in Japanese, I should mention the boss's name in this video is actually different to the one that's usually there. Crabullus, which otherwise is known as Gizala. Now that we got the second upgrade, I'm going to go straight to Area 3. This video is a little shorter compared to the other one because in the first video I did all the bosses. Because there's really not much of a reason to backtrack to Area 1 since you don't really get any upgrades besides 2 life ups in the story mode, which I guess could be helpful since even though you don't actually get the life upgrade, you actually do get all your health back, which does save you a retry, which, pro tip, if you find yourself losing a lot of health, whenever you come out of a dungeon or you get a checkpoint, just hit retry and you'll get all your health back. You're not going to lose any progress, and I actually recommend doing this. I actually did this a couple times when I was going through that dungeon because I was about to die. I was like, fuck it, I'll just hit the L and just restart and get all my health back. This is a very much viable strategy that I recommend you use, but yeah, I'm sorry for this video being a little short, but next area I am going to go a little bit more over about the bosses and stuff, and yeah, this video is kind of short, but when we return to Area 2, we'll have a lot more to talk about. For right now, that concludes Part 2. Up next is one of my favorite areas in the game, and has the best song in the game. But until then, stay tuned, and thanks for watching.